Have you ever thought about what truly happens on late-night train rides? What if I told you that some passengers never reach their destination? Or worse, they vanish into stories no one dares to believe. From ghostly stations to haunting whispers, these are real-life encounters that will make you question ever boarding a train again. Buckle up, because what you're about to hear will chill you to your core. Never imagined this could happen? You're about to find out why. Pedro was running late. The last train his only option. The station was eerily empty. The silence, so loud it made his skin crawl. But when the train finally screeched to a halt, he breathed a sigh of relief. Or so he thought. As he stepped off the train at his usual stop, something felt off. The signs looked worn. The walls cracked, as if untouched for decades. The air was heavy, almost suffocating. He reached for his phone, no signal, no GPS. This can't be right, he whispered to himself. But when he turned to look back at the train, it was gone, vanished into the night. Desperate, Pedro wandered through the station, calling out for someone to help. That's when he saw them, figures standing still in the shadows, their faces blank, their eyes empty. They weren't moving, but he could feel their presence closing in. Pedro tried to run, but no matter which corridor he turned down, he ended up back where he started. Time seemed frozen. His watch? The hands weren't ticking. And then he heard it, a voice echoing through the hollow space. You shouldn't be here. But before he could even scream, everything went black. Pedro was never seen again. Some say he's still there, trapped in that station that doesn't exist on any map. And if you ever take the last train, look closely. You might see him staring back at you from the other side of the glass. Cue to next story. But if you think that's chilling, wait until you hear about the train that doesn't carry the living. Stay with me. It was past midnight when Lucas boarded the final train home. The platform was empty, save for a thick mist that clung to the ground like it had a life of its own. As the train doors slid shut, Lucas noticed something strange. The passengers. They were unusually pale, their faces emotionless. Some wore outdated clothing, styles from decades, even centuries ago. Lucas brushed it off, thinking maybe it was a costume party or just his fatigue playing tricks on him. But as the train began to move, he noticed the temperature drop. He could see his breath in the air, even though it was midsummer. And then came the whispers, soft, unintelligible murmurs, like voices calling out from far away. Lucas tried to focus, to make out the words. That's when he felt it. A pair of cold eyes staring at him. Slowly, he turned his head, and the woman sitting across from him, who hadn't moved the entire ride, was now looking directly into his soul. Her lips curled into a faint smile, but her eyes were wrong. Hollow, black. And then she spoke in a voice that didn't belong to her. You don't belong here. Panic surged through him. Lucas jumped to his feet and rushed toward the conductor's cabin. But the corridor seemed endless. The harder he ran, the longer the train stretched. When he finally burst into the conductor's booth, it was empty. No one driving the train. And when he turned around, the passengers were no longer sitting. They were standing, watching him silently, blocking every exit. Lucas's screams were swallowed by the train's screeching brakes. When the authorities found the carriage the next morning, it was completely empty. No passengers. No Lucas. Just an old train ticket, dated 1923. Sophia never traveled without her headphones. It was her escape, a way to tune out the world during her long commutes. That night, though, the music wasn't enough to block out the strange vibe of the train. The lights flickered every so often, and the passengers were unusually quiet, as if they, too, sensed something wasn't right. She scrolled through her playlist, landing on her favorite track. But a few minutes into the song, she noticed something strange, a faint whisper under the melody. She paused the music and listened closely, thinking it might be interference. But the whisper didn't stop. It was a voice. Can you hear me? Sophia's heart skipped a beat. She looked around, but the other passengers seemed oblivious. Nervously, she resumed the music, hoping it was just a glitch. But then, the whispers became clearer. Don't turn around. Her hands trembled as she pulled the headphones off, but the whisper didn't stop. It was inside her head now, clear as day and getting louder. "He's right behind you." She froze. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end. Slowly, she glanced at the window's reflection, and that's when she saw it, a dark, shadowy figure standing inches behind her. Sophia whipped around, but there was nothing there. The other passengers were staring at her now, as if they'd been watching the whole time. She tried to shake it off, telling herself she was imagining things. But the whispers kept coming. They told her secrets, about the people around her, about her darkest fears, and worst of all, about her own past. Secrets no one else could possibly know. The train came to a stop, and Sophia bolted off, desperate to escape. She never took the train again, but the voice never left her. It still speaks to her in the dead of night, reminding her of what she heard that evening. But Sophia's torment pales in comparison to the man who received a one-way ticket to nowhere. Are you ready for this one? Let me tell you about the cursed ticket with no destination. Jorge wasn't a superstitious man. When he found an old train ticket on the platform with the words, "Your destination is the end," scrawled across it, he chuckled, thinking it was someone's idea of a bad joke. But his curiosity got the best of him. He pocketed the ticket and boarded the train. At first, everything seemed normal. The carriage was half empty, filled with the hum of quiet conversations and the occasional announcement crackling over the intercom. Jorge leaned back in his seat, staring at the ticket. That's when the train began to change. The chatter around him faded. The lights dimmed, flickering like a dying flame. He glanced around, noticing that the passengers were now sitting eerily still, their faces obscured by shadows. Then, the train took a sharp turn, one that wasn't on the usual route. Jorge looked out the window, expecting to see the familiar city lights, but there was nothing, just endless darkness stretching into the void. "This isn't right," he muttered, clutching the ticket tightly. Suddenly, the intercom buzzed, and a distorted voice echoed through the carriage. "Next stop, the end." Panic surged through him as he stood and rushed toward the conductor's cabin. But no matter how many doors he passed, they all led to the same carriage, the same lifeless passengers, the same suffocating darkness outside. And then the passengers began to change. One by one, their heads turned to face Jorge, their blank eyes staring directly at him. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The train screeched to a halt, throwing him off balance. He looked up, and the doors hissed open to reveal a place that defied logic, a barren wasteland of ash and shadows. Figures loomed in the distance, beckoning him forward. The last thing Jorge heard was the voice on the intercom. "Thank you for traveling with us. Enjoy your final destination." When the authorities searched the train the next morning, it was empty. The only thing they found was a single ticket with the words "The End" written in red. Cue to next story. Chilling, isn't it? But what happens when it's not the passengers or the train that haunts you, but the one driving it? Stay with me as we uncover the truth about the conductor who never smiled.